Michel Del Buono. He's a senior economist and a consultant at the United Nations Development Program in Afghanistan. He joins us from Silver Spring in the U.S. state of Maryland. Thank you so much for joining us. The warnings about this humanitarian crisis have been coming ever since the Taliban took over in August last year. But is the situation actually being made worse by the fact that so much of Afghanistan's money has been frozen by the United States?
Well, this is so. Obviously, in spite of the new openings and new permissions that the U.S. has granted by piercing holes in the sanctions, Afghanistan is essentially under an economic blockade. Now, in that context, when Mr. Miliband suggested that restarting the economy would be good, he has a point. It is obvious that restarting the economy would be the best remedy for Afghanistan, even much better than getting the $4.4 billion that the UN has asked. However, I do not believe that under this state of blockade, the economy of Afghanistan could be restarted anytime soon, and certainly not within, say, a year or so. On the other hand, his suggestion to have another pledging conference, while one might discount whether it will have better results than the previous one or not, is still, I think, a logical step and should be taken. I don't know if the world is waiting for a huge disaster, an immense loss of life in Afghanistan before they wake up, but I think the Prime Minister is doing well in pushing for another pledging conference.
Well, with the pledging conferences, it also does take quite a long time before that money actually reaches the people in Afghanistan, especially those who are suffering through a bitterly cold winter. And Michel, we know that many aid groups don't really take a stance on the politics of a country. They're there to help the people. But when it comes to Afghanistan, surely these groups also have to work with the Taliban to ensure the help actually gets to those who need it most and isn't being taken by those who already have or can make do this winter?
I believe that one should be pragmatic, while not, if the international community does not want to recognize the Taliban, so be it. But it must accept the necessity of working with them to avoid a huge humanitarian disaster. I agree entirely with you that it should be done. And some international agencies working there, including my employer, UNDP, have managed to be able to work with the Taliban without giving it much recognition by paying directly the people who provide health or education services rather than paying them through a ministry budget. Frankly, also, one must think that in the past 20 years or so, it was donors who essentially maintained the supply of health and education services. Not much effort was expended in making these services self-sustaining. To say that they could be made self-sustaining now in a few months with $4.4 billion is fantasy.
Yeah, and there's so much that needs to move forward for this country, for the people of the country. They can't rely on aid for the next few years just to survive. They need a functioning economy. But how does that happen when the Taliban are the de facto leaders? What is the international community's responsibility here?
I think the responsibility of the international community is clear in the moral sense. In the legal and economic sense, well, people are looking for ways out to avoid their responsibilities. On the other hand, one hopes that conditions will soften against Afghanistan and that perhaps in the next year or two, we will be able to push the economy towards a resumption of growth.
Hopefully that will be the case to help those who really are in desperate need of help in Afghanistan. Michel Del Buono, really appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on the program, and I would like to remind you that I'm speaking in a personal capacity and not as a member of UNDP. Absolutely. Thank you very much and good evening.